Today's story is, the plus-size maid accidentally saw the Mafia boss changing his bandages. Her life changed forever. What could happen when a maid accidentally sees the one thing a feared Mafia boss desperately wants hidden? And why would that private moment change both of their lives forever? Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you enjoy stories about dignity, unexpected compassion, and the moments that reveal who people truly are, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you for watching, for supporting this channel, and for spending part of your day with us. And tell me in the comments, if you accidentally witnessed a powerful person in a vulnerable moment, would you pretend you had seen nothing? Now, let's begin today's story. How much did you see? Danielle Brooks froze in the doorway. 3 seconds earlier, she had been carrying a stack of freshly pressed towels through the silent second floor of the Calloway mansion. Now she couldn't move. The room beyond the half-open door glowed beneath a single amber lamp. Rain whispered against the tall windows, turning the Chicago skyline into blurred streaks of silver and gold. And standing beside an antique mirror was Vincent Calloway, the man everyone in the house feared. His white dress shirt lay across a leather chair. A roll of gauze rested beside a half-open medical kit. Around his ribs, a thick bandage had been loosened, revealing dark bruising beneath pale skin. A thin line of blood traveled slowly down his side. Danielle's fingers tightened around the towels. She had worked in this mansion for 4 months, long enough to understand its unwritten rules. Don't ask about the black cars arriving after midnight. Don't stare at the armed men stationed near the west entrance. And never, ever, enter Vincent Calloway's private rooms without permission. She had broken the last rule by accident. The linen closet she normally used was being repaired. The head housekeeper had told her there were spare towels in the adjoining dressing room. Nobody had told her Vincent was inside. Danielle immediately lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Calloway. I thought the room was empty." She stepped backward. "Stop." One word. Quiet. Controlled. It stopped her more effectively than a shout. Danielle raised her eyes again. Vincent had turned toward her. At 38, he possessed the kind of presence that made conversations die when he entered a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, immaculately dressed whenever Danielle saw him. Tonight, none of that armor was there. There was only a wounded man standing beneath warm lamplight, one hand gripping the edge of the dresser. Yet his eyes remained cold. "How much did you see?" he repeated. Danielle swallowed. "Enough to know I shouldn't be here." Something changed in his expression. Not anger. Calculation. His gaze moved from Danielle's face to the hallway behind her. For the first time, she understood why the mansion felt different tonight. Why 2 security guards had disappeared from their usual posts. Why Vincent had returned through the private garage instead of the front entrance. Whatever had happened to him, he didn't want the household knowing. Danielle lowered the towels onto a nearby table. "I won't tell anyone." "I didn't ask whether you'd tell anyone." His voice was soft enough to make her pulse quicken. He reached for fresh gauze. Then his hand trembled. Barely. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Danielle did. Vincent pulled the bandage around his ribs, but his jaw tightened sharply. Fresh red spread through the white gauze almost immediately. Danielle stared. Every sensible instinct told her to leave. Keep the job. Keep her head down. Remain invisible. She took one step, then moved. And for the first time since Danielle Brooks had entered his house, Vincent Calloway looked at his maid as though she were no longer invisible. 4 months earlier, Danielle Brooks had arrived at the Calloway mansion carrying everything she needed in one faded brown handbag. She had learned long ago that people made decisions about her before she ever opened her mouth. They saw a black woman with a soft, plus-size figure, round cheeks, warm brown eyes, and a gentle face that made strangers assume she would accept whatever treatment they offered. Danielle usually let them assume. Not because she was weak. Because surviving had taught her that not every insult deserved the price of a response. The Calloway mansion stood behind iron gates on Chicago's North Shore, all gray stone, towering windows, polished mahogany, and quiet wealth. Even the floors seemed expensive enough to demand an apology when someone walked across them. Danielle needed the job. Her mother, Evelyn, was 62 and still working more hours than her knees could comfortably endure. Danielle wanted to change that. She was also saving money to return to school and finish the education she'd abandoned years earlier when her family needed her income more than she needed her dreams. So when the employment agency offered steady work with excellent pay, Danielle hadn't cared whose mansion it was. Then she heard the name. Controlled. Expensively dressed. Pale blue eyes that seemed to register everything without revealing anything. He passed Danielle without looking. Vincent stared at her. Men twice Danielle's size had reportedly gone pale beneath that stare. She had watched senior staff straighten whenever Vincent entered a room, watched armed guards lower their voices around him. But Danielle wasn't thinking about the stories. She was watching the blood. Another crimson stain was spreading through the fresh gauze around his ribs. "You're pulling it too tightly," she said. "And you're twisting to reach the wound. You're making it worse." His expression hardened. "Are you a doctor?" "No, a nurse." "No, sir." "Then we're finished." He turned away. Danielle exhaled slowly. There it was. The door back to safety. She could pick up her towels, walk downstairs, finish polishing the dining room, and pretend this moment had never happened. Then Vincent reached toward the medical tray. His fingers missed the scissors. They struck the silver edge instead. The instrument clattered onto the hardwood floor. Vincent froze. So did Danielle. For a man whose entire existence seemed built around control, that tiny failure looked almost violent. Danielle remembered another room. Another stubborn man. Her father sitting on the edge of his bed after surgery, insisting he could change his own dressing while sweat gathered across his forehead. Pride had nearly sent him back to the hospital with an infection. Danielle had loved him too much to protect his pride. She looked at Vincent. Apparently, fear wasn't enough to make her protect his either. "My father had abdominal surgery," she said. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "I changed his dressings for months. I know I'm not a medical professional, but I know what happens when somebody keeps reopening a wound because he's too stubborn to ask for help." Silence. Danielle immediately wondered whether calling a mafia boss stubborn had been the shortest employment decision of her life. Vincent glanced toward the door. "Close it." Her stomach tightened. "Sir." "The door." Danielle hesitated, then closed it gently. The click of the latch seemed impossibly loud. Vincent sat on the edge of a leather bench. 5 minutes. Danielle blinked. "You have 5 minutes to prove you know what you're talking about." She approached the medical kit. Up close, the injury looked worse. Danielle kept her expression neutral. Whatever had caused it wasn't her business. That mattered. She washed her hands at the adjoining sink, pulled on disposable gloves, and inspected the supplies. "May I?" Vincent looked at her hand hovering near the damaged dressing. He wasn't accustomed to being asked permission, perhaps even less accustomed to giving it. Finally, he nodded. Danielle carefully loosened the gauze. Vincent's muscles tightened beneath her fingers. "You can breathe," she murmured. "I am breathing." "Not properly." His eyes lifted to hers. For one reckless second, Danielle almost smiled. She didn't. Instead, she cleaned around the wound with deliberate movements, remembering everything she'd once done for her father. No unnecessary touch. No pity. No frightened questions. Vincent watched her throughout. Most people couldn't resist curiosity around him. They wanted to know where he'd been, whom he'd met, what had happened. Danielle asked nothing. That unsettled him more than questions would have. "You're not curious?" he said. Danielle secured the clean dressing. "About what?" "How this happened." Her hand stopped for half a heartbeat, then continued. "You'll tell me if you want me to know." Vincent studied her face. No calculation. No hunger for gossip. No attempt to turn vulnerability into opportunity. Just concentration. Danielle stepped back. "That should hold better. But you need someone qualified to examine it." Vincent looked down at the neat bandage, then back at her. "You're not going to ask?" "No, sir." "Why?" Danielle removed the gloves. "Because being hurt doesn't mean you owe me your secrets." The words landed differently than she intended. Vincent's face remained still, but something behind his eyes shifted. Danielle turned toward the door. She had nearly reached it when his voice stopped her again. "Danielle." It was the first time Vincent Calloway had ever said her name. She slowly looked back. He was watching her differently now. Not as staff. Not quite as a stranger. "Who taught you to treat people like that?" Danielle's eyes softened. "My father." Then she left. Vincent remained alone beneath the amber light, staring at the closed door. For years, everyone who discovered a weakness in him had tried to use it. Tonight, a woman with every reason to fear him had discovered one. And all she'd done was help. Danielle had almost reached the servant's staircase when the door opened behind her. "Wait." She stopped. Vincent stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame. Something was wrong. His face had lost color. "Mr. Calloway?" Come back. This time, the command carried less authority than effort. Danielle returned immediately. Vincent made it 3 steps before gripping the dresser. His breathing became shallow. Danielle's eyes dropped to the bandage. A small red stain had appeared again, not enough to explain his condition. She touched the back of her fingers to his forehead. Vincent caught her wrist. Fast. Instinctive. For one breath, neither moved. I'm checking whether you have a fever, Danielle said calmly. His grip loosened. She tried again. His skin was warm. Too warm. How long ago did this happen? Vincent's eyes sharpened. Danielle understood immediately. That question had crossed the boundary. Forget I asked. She reached for the medical kit. Vincent watched her. 3 days. Danielle slowly turned. 3 days? She looked at the bruising again, then at the discarded gauze. You've been walking around like this for 3 days? I've had worse. That wasn't my question. His mouth tightened. Danielle opened the antiseptic. You need a doctor. No, Mr. Calloway, no doctor. The finality in his voice filled the room. Danielle looked around. A mansion protected by armed guards. Cars worth more than houses. Enough money to summon specialists at midnight. Yet Vincent Calloway was hiding alone in his bedroom, bleeding into gauze he couldn't properly secure. That didn't make sense. Unless the danger wasn't outside these walls. Danielle's gaze returned to him. She didn't ask. Vincent noticed. You want to? Want to what? Ask why. Danielle began cleaning the blood from the edge of the dressing. Wanting to know something doesn't make it my business. Vincent gave a humorless laugh. Everyone makes my business their business. I'm not everyone. The words escaped before Danielle could soften them. Vincent went still. Danielle concentrated on the bandage. Her hands were steady now. She remembered her father complaining whenever she fussed over him. Pretending jokes could disguise pain. Vincent didn't joke. He used silence instead. Different armor. Same purpose. You've been changing these yourself? She asked. Yes. No one knows. Vincent didn't answer. That was answer enough. Danielle secured the dressing more carefully. You can't keep doing this alone. I've been doing things alone for 20 years. There was something beneath the sentence. Not pride. Weariness. Danielle looked up. For the first time, she wasn't seeing the man whose name made employees whisper. She was seeing someone who had apparently built an entire life around never needing another human being. That doesn't mean you have to bleed alone too. Vincent's eyes locked onto hers. The room became impossibly quiet. Danielle immediately returned her attention to the medical kit. She hadn't meant the sentence to sound personal. Maybe it was. Vincent studied her as she packed away the supplies. Why haven't you asked what happened? Danielle closed the box. Would the answer change how I treat the wound? He said nothing. Then I don't need it. She removed her gloves and carried the bloodied gauze toward the waste bin. Danielle. She turned. If anyone learns about this, they won't learn it from me. You don't understand what that promise means in my world. Danielle's expression remained gentle. Maybe not. She paused. But I understand what it means in mine. Vincent stared at her. There was no fear in her voice now. Only dignity. Danielle left the room without another question. After the door closed, Vincent remained motionless. Her restraint bothered him. He trusted fear because fear was predictable. He trusted greed because greed always named its price. But kindness without a demand. That was dangerous. Before Danielle left the second floor, she stopped in the hallway. One condition, Mr. Calloway. Vincent looked at her. You let someone qualified examine that wound tonight. I can change a dressing. I cannot tell you what's happening underneath it. His expression hardened automatically. Danielle held his gaze. Those are my limits. An hour later, Marcus brought in Dr. Elias Warren, a physician who had treated the Calloway family discreetly for years. He confirmed there was no internal complication requiring hospitalization, cleaned and closed the reopened area properly, prescribed medication, and left written instructions. Danielle's help after that remained exactly what she had said it was, basic dressing care, never a substitute for medical treatment. Later, Vincent's phone vibrated on the dresser. A message from his security chief illuminated the screen. Someone inside the house knows you were hit. Vincent's expression changed. Coldness returned instantly. He looked toward the door Danielle had just closed. Only 3 people were supposed to know about the wound. Now there were 4. And somewhere inside his own home, someone had already started talking. By sunrise, Vincent Calloway had already decided Danielle Brooks was dangerous. Not because she had threatened him, because she hadn't. Vincent understood threats. He understood ambition, fear, betrayal, and favors disguised as friendship. Every person who entered his world eventually wanted something. Danielle had seen him bleeding. Then she'd walked away asking for nothing. That made no sense to him. The next morning, Danielle was polishing the long dining table when a black envelope appeared beside her hand. She looked up. Vincent's personal assistant stood nearby. "Mr. Calloway asked me to give you this." Danielle opened it. Inside was a check. $5,000. Her breath caught. That amount could cover months of her mother's expenses. It could pay tuition deposits. It could move several dreams from someday to possible. Danielle stared at it for a long moment, then folded it carefully. "Where is he?" 20 minutes later, Vincent sat behind his mahogany desk when Danielle entered. He looked immaculate again. Charcoal suit, silver watch, cold blue eyes. Only Danielle knew what existed beneath the tailored jacket. She placed the envelope on his desk. Vincent glanced at it. "Not enough." Danielle blinked. "Excuse me. I can increase it." For the first time, irritation crossed her gentle face. "I don't want it." Vincent leaned back. "Everyone wants money. I want money too." That answer surprised him. Danielle touched the envelope. "I want to finish school. I want my mother to stop working herself exhausted. I want plenty of things." "Then take it." "No," his gaze hardened. "Why?" "Because I didn't help you for money." Silence settled between them. Vincent studied her as if she were speaking a language he'd forgotten. "Then what do you want?" Danielle almost laughed. "Nothing. Nobody wants nothing." "Maybe that's the problem." His jaw tightened. Danielle immediately knew she'd pushed too far. But she didn't retreat. "You were bleeding," she said softly. "I knew how to help. So I helped." That's simple. Yes. Nothing in Vincent Calloway's life had ever been that simple. At 9, he'd learned favors created debts. At 19, he'd learned loyalty could be purchased. At 38, he'd learned that nearly everyone had a price. Yet Danielle was standing before $5,000 she desperately needed and refusing to let him turn compassion into a transaction. Vincent looked away first. "Keep the check." "No, Danielle." "No, sir." His eyes snapped back to hers. Few people interrupted him. Fewer refused him twice. Danielle slid the envelope across the polished desk. "If you want to thank me, heal properly." Something almost resembling amusement touched his face. "Almost. You give orders easily for a maid." Danielle's expression changed. Not wounded. Steady. "I wasn't aware kindness had a job title." The words landed between them. Vincent froze. Danielle lowered her eyes, but she didn't apologize. "May I return to work?" After several seconds, Vincent nodded. She turned toward the door. "Danielle." She looked back. "Your mother." Her body stiffened. Vincent noticed immediately. "What about her?" "You said she's still working." Danielle's warmth disappeared. "If you've been investigating my family, I haven't." The answer came quickly. Too quickly for manipulation. "I heard what you said." Danielle relaxed slightly. Vincent looked at the return check. "Why are you trying to go back to school?" Her surprise showed. No one in the mansion had ever asked. "Nursing." The word seemed to change the air. "My father was sick for a long time. I learned enough to help him, but I always wanted to learn enough to help people properly." Vincent's gaze softened by a fraction. "You would be good at it." Danielle stared at him. It was the first compliment he'd ever given her. "Thank you." She left. Vincent remained behind his desk, looking at the envelope. For reasons he couldn't explain, her refusal felt more valuable than acceptance. Then the office door opened. His security chief, Marcus Hale, entered and locked it behind him. Vincent's expression immediately cooled. "What did you find?" Marcus placed a phone on the desk. "We confirmed the leak came from inside the mansion." Vincent became perfectly still. "And there's something else." Marcus turned the screen toward him. Security footage filled the display. Danielle, walking out of Vincent's private room the previous night. Marcus's voice dropped. "She was the last person seen leaving your quarters before the information got out." Vincent stared at the image. For the first time that morning, the return check no longer looked like proof of Danielle's character. It looked like a question. "Bring her to me." Vincent's voice contained no anger. Marcus Hale knew that was worse. 20 minutes later, Danielle entered the study and immediately sensed something had changed. Vincent stood beside the windows, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed. Marcus remained near the door. On the desk between them lay a phone displaying a frozen security image. Danielle recognized herself. Leaving Vincent's room, Her stomach tightened. "Sit down," Vincent said. "I'd rather stand." Marcus glanced at her. Vincent slowly turned. For several seconds, those pale blue eyes searched Danielle's face. "Someone disclosed information about my injury last night." Danielle's breath stopped. "So that was it. I didn't tell anyone." "You were seen leaving his private quarters," Marcus said. Danielle looked toward him. "I was there. You admit it?" "I have nothing to deny." Marcus stepped closer. "Who did you speak to afterward?" "No one." "Who did you call?" "My mother." "What did you tell her?" Danielle's expression hardened. "That I loved her and would call Sunday." Marcus reached for the phone. "We can verify." "No," Vincent's voice cut through the room. Marcus stopped. Danielle looked at Vincent. He hadn't taken his eyes off her. "Leave us." "Vincent, now." The door closed behind Marcus. Silence returned. Danielle folded her hands in front of her, forcing them not to tremble. "You think I betrayed you?" It wasn't a question. Vincent walked toward the desk. "I think information escaped my house after you learned it." Danielle swallowed. "And because I'm the maid, I'm the easiest explanation." His jaw tightened. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The words struck harder than she intended. Danielle looked away. She had spent years learning how humiliation worked. It rarely announced itself openly. Sometimes it came wrapped in suspicion. Sometimes in a polite voice. Sometimes people simply decided what someone like her was capable of before allowing her to speak. Vincent picked up the returned envelope from that morning. "You refused $5,000. "Yes. If you were selling information, refusing this would be useful." Danielle stared at him. Pain crossed her face before she could hide it. Vincent saw it. Something inside him shifted. Not because she looked guilty, because she looked disappointed. "I cleaned your wound," Danielle said quietly. "I kept your secret because you were entitled to privacy. I refused your money because kindness wasn't something I wanted you to purchase." Her voice trembled now. "But I won't beg you to believe me." Vincent's eyes narrowed. "You understand what happens if you're lying?" "Yes." "And you're not afraid?" Danielle gave a small, sad smile. "Of course I'm afraid." She stepped toward the desk. "But fear doesn't make me dishonest." The room went silent. A knock interrupted them. Marcus entered without waiting. "Sir, Raymond wants the household staff suspended until we've completed interviews." Raymond Pierce, Vincent's oldest lieutenant, a man who had served the Calloway organization for 15 years. Marcus continued. "He specifically recommends terminating Miss Brooks immediately. Says keeping her here creates unnecessary exposure." Danielle lowered her eyes. There it was. Simple. Efficient. Disposable. "If you've already decided I'm guilty," she said quietly, "say it plainly. I won't beg to stay in a house where my word means nothing." Vincent remembered her hands treating his wound without questions. Then the $5,000 check returned untouched. His entire life had taught him to remove risk before it could become betrayal. But suspicion was not proof. His eyes moved to Marcus, then to Raymond, who had appeared beyond the open doorway. "She stays while we investigate." Raymond froze. Danielle did not thank him. She simply held Vincent's gaze, as if reminding him that allowing evidence to exist was the minimum, not a favor. Vincent looked toward both men. "And from this moment forward, nobody questions Danielle Brooks without my permission." The hallway fell silent. Raymond Pierce gave a controlled nod and stepped away with Marcus. Vincent watched both men leave. For the first time, he forced himself to widen the question beyond the easiest suspect. The evidence appeared in Danielle's locker before lunch. Marcus found it inside the pocket of her spare uniform. A small black phone. No password. No contacts. Only 3 messages. "Calloway is wounded. 3 days. Right side. He is hiding it from his men." Danielle stared at the screen. Her face went cold. "I've never seen that phone before." Raymond Pierce stood across the staff room with his arms folded. "Of course you haven't." Danielle looked at him. There was something almost satisfied in his voice. Vincent noticed it too. Around them, 6 members of the household staff stood in suffocating silence. People who had eaten beside Danielle for months now avoided her eyes. Marcus placed the phone on the table. "It was found in your locker. I understand where you found it." Danielle's voice remained quiet. "That doesn't make it mine." Raymond exhaled. "Vincent, this has gone far enough." Danielle heard the certainty in his tone. Not fear. Recognition. She knew this moment. She had lived versions of it before. The moment when evidence mattered less than how believable guilt looked on someone society already considered easy to discard. Raymond stepped closer. She had access. She knew about the wound. Now we find the leak in her belongings. What exactly are we debating? Vincent said nothing. Danielle looked at him. That hurt more than Raymond's accusation. Because Vincent had seen her when nobody else had. Or she'd thought he had. Danielle slowly untied her apron. Again. This time, she didn't place it on Vincent's desk. She folded it over the back of a chair. I'll collect my things. Vincent's head lifted. No, Danielle met his eyes. I won't stay somewhere I'm treated like a criminal until someone decides otherwise. We're investigating. And while you investigate, everyone in this house gets to look at me like that? She gestured toward the silent staff. Her eyes shone, but no tears fell. I need this job, Mr. Calloway. More than you know. Her voice softened. But I need my self-respect more. Vincent froze. Raymond exhaled impatiently. She's manipulating you. Danielle turned toward him. No, I'm leaving. She walked toward the door. Raymond moved aside without comment. Vincent barely looked at him. His attention remained on Danielle. Danielle. She stopped without turning. Vincent's voice changed. Give me 1 hour. For what? To find out who put that phone in your locker. Marcus looked at Vincent. You believe her? Vincent picked up the black phone. I believe someone made this too easy. He examined the messages. Precise information. Too precise. Danielle had known about the bandages, but Vincent had never told her when or where he'd been injured. She couldn't have known 3 days unless, his eyes sharpened, unless she'd learned it when he answered her question, after she had already entered the room. Yet security records showed the first leaked message had been transmitted 12 minutes before Danielle ever opened his door. Vincent became perfectly still. Marcus. His security chief stepped closer. Timestamp. Marcus checked. Then checked again. His face changed. The room seemed to lose all warmth. The first message, Vincent said slowly, was sent before Danielle knew I was injured. Nobody spoke. Danielle turned around. Raymond stared at the phone. Vincent walked toward him. For 15 years, Raymond had stood at his side, shared tables with him, protected him, called him brother. And yet when suspicion appeared, Vincent had almost allowed the easiest person to carry the blame. The woman with the least power in the house. Lock down the estate, Vincent said. Marcus nodded. Nobody leaves. Raymond's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. Vincent ignored him. He looked at Danielle instead. Something unfamiliar sat behind his eyes. Shame. You were right. Danielle didn't smile. About what? Vincent looked around at the people who had judged her without proof. Then back at the woman who had refused to surrender her dignity just to keep his approval. You shouldn't have to beg me to believe you. Danielle's eyes softened, but only slightly. Vincent turned toward Marcus. Find who planted the phone. Then his gaze settled on Raymond. And this time, start with the people who had something to gain. Raymond said nothing. Marcus quietly ordered the security team to preserve every corridor recording and access log. And suddenly, the most dangerous secret in the mansion was no longer hidden beneath Vincent Calloway's bandages. Raymond Pierce lasted 11 minutes. That was how long Marcus needed to uncover the security footage Raymond thought he'd erased. Vincent watched it without blinking. There was Raymond entering the staff corridor at 6:14 that morning. There was the black phone in his hand. And there he was opening Danielle's locker. The room went silent. Raymond stood across from Vincent in the study, his face drained of color. You were going to blame her, Vincent said. Raymond swallowed. I was protecting you. By betraying me? Raymond's jaw tightened. You've become careless. She saw you wounded, Vincent. She's staff. She was expendable. Something changed in Vincent's eyes. Danielle, standing near the doorway beside Marcus, felt it immediately. Not rage. Something colder. Expendable. Vincent repeated the word as though tasting something. Rotten. Raymond looked toward Danielle. She cleans your floors. Vincent rose. And you sold information that could get my people killed. Raymond's face hardened. It was business. No, Vincent stepped closer. It was betrayal. He looked at Marcus. Remove him. Raymond's confidence finally cracked. Vincent, get him out of my house. Marcus escorted Raymond away. No violence. No shouting. Only the heavy closing of the study doors. Somehow, that silence felt more final. Vincent remained standing behind his desk. Danielle turned to leave. Please stay. She stopped. Please. She had never heard that word from him before. The mansion became quiet again as night settled beyond the windows. Vincent dismissed everyone else, leaving only Danielle and the soft ticking of an antique clock. He walked toward her. I owe you an apology. Danielle looked at him. Yes. Vincent almost smiled. Almost. I expected you to tell me I didn't. You nearly let someone destroy my name because believing the maid was convenient. There was no cruelty in her voice. That made it worse. Vincent lowered his eyes. You're right. Danielle studied him. Powerful men apologize differently, she'd learned. Some apologized to end conversations. Some apologized because they feared consequences. Vincent looked like a man discovering that admitting wrong could hurt more than being wounded. Why didn't you leave? He asked. I almost did. No. That first night. Danielle understood. When you saw the bandages, he continued, you could have walked away. She looked toward the rain-darkened windows. I was afraid. Vincent's expression shifted. You didn't look afraid. I've had practice. A small silence passed. Then Danielle met his eyes. But I wasn't afraid because you were wounded. What were you afraid of? What you do because I'd seen you that way. Vincent absorbed that. And what exactly did you see? Danielle could have said blood. Bruises. A powerful man struggling to change his own dressing. Instead, she answered the question beneath his question. A lonely man. Vincent froze. Danielle's voice softened. I saw someone hurting himself because asking another person for help felt more dangerous than the pain. He looked away. No enemy had ever struck him there. Danielle continued gently. You thought I saw weakness, didn't you? No, she stepped closer. I saw someone who had forgotten that needing help doesn't make him smaller. The clock ticked. Once. Twice. Vincent's defenses seemed to have nowhere left to hide. My father used to do the same thing, Danielle said. He thought being strong meant carrying pain quietly. What did you tell him? A faint smile touched her face. That pain doesn't become noble just because nobody sees it. Vincent finally smiled. Small. Tired. Real. Then his expression grew serious again. You saw me before I saw you. Danielle tilted her head. I knew your name. That's not what I mean. His eyes settled on hers. I knew there was a maid named Danielle Brooks in my house. I didn't know you wanted to become a nurse. I didn't know about your father. I didn't know what you were sacrificing for your mother. His voice lowered. I didn't see you. Danielle said nothing. Vincent looked toward the medical kit still resting on a side table. The first night you walked into my room, I thought the dangerous thing was that you discovered my wound. He faced her again. I was wrong. Danielle's heartbeat quickened. What was dangerous? Vincent held her gaze. That you made me realize how many people I'd stopped seeing. For once, Danielle had no answer. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the glass. Vincent reached toward her, then stopped before touching her hand. He waited. Danielle noticed. Permission. The same thing she'd offered him while changing his bandages. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. And neither of them looked away. 3 months later, the medical kit was still in Vincent Calloway's bedroom, but the door was no longer locked. Danielle stood beside the window, morning sunlight warming her brown skin as she removed the final strip of gauze from Vincent's side. The wound had become a pale scar. Healed, she said. Vincent looked down. You sound disappointed. Danielle laughed softly. Trust me, Mr. Calloway. I have better things to do than chase a stubborn man around with. Bandages. Vincent. She raised an eyebrow. What? You still call me Mr. Calloway. You're still technically my employer. Not for much longer. Danielle's smile disappeared. Vincent crossed to the dresser and picked up an envelope. She immediately narrowed her eyes. If that's another check, it isn't. Inside was an acceptance letter. Danielle stared at the nursing program seal. Her hands trembled. I don't understand. You applied 2 months ago. Her eyes snapped toward him. How did you know? You left the application brochure in the kitchen. Danielle read the letter again. Then she noticed a second document. Tuition assistance. Her expression changed. Vincent, before you refuse, read it. She did. It wasn't a gift. The Calloway household had established an education program for every full-time employee who wanted professional training or further education. Danielle looked up. Everyone. Everyone. Something tightened in her throat. Vincent had finally understood. She had never wanted to become his charity. She wanted an opportunity that didn't require surrendering her dignity. You did this because of me? I did it because you showed me something I should have understood years ago. Danielle carefully returned the papers to the envelope. Downstairs, another change waited. Vincent had called the entire household together. Danielle stood beside the staff members who had watched her accused months earlier. Vincent faced them. Danielle Brooks was falsely accused in this house. No one moved. I allowed suspicion to fall on her before I had facts. That was my failure. Danielle stared at him. A man feared across Chicago was admitting publicly that he'd been wrong. She protected my privacy when betraying it could have benefited her. She was treated with suspicion when she had earned respect. Vincent paused. No employee in this house will ever again be considered disposable. The room went silent. Danielle didn't need revenge. She didn't need Raymond humiliated before her. This was what she had needed. Her name returned to her clean. Her dignity acknowledged in the same room where it had been questioned. Weeks passed. Danielle began classes. She reduced her hours at the mansion, studied late into the night, and eventually convinced Evelyn to cut back her own exhausting schedule. One evening, she studied pharmacology at the kitchen table until nearly midnight. Vincent entered, noticed the untouched coffee beside her notes, and disappeared without interrupting. 10 minutes later, he returned with a fresh cup. "No check attached," he said. Danielle looked up, amused. "You're learning." Slowly. He left her to study, and she caught herself smiling after him. A week later, Vincent passed her near the staircase. "How did the dosage calculation exam go?" Danielle stopped. She had mentioned it only once, days earlier. 94. His expression warmed. "You're disappointed about 6 points, aren't you?" "Maybe. Your father would be proud." The gentleness of the sentence caught her off guard. "Thank you, Vincent." This time his name came naturally. Vincent changed too. Not dramatically. Men like him didn't become different overnight. But he listened more. He learned names. He stopped confusing fear with loyalty. And somewhere between Danielle's evening classes and Vincent's slowly healing scar, their relationship became something neither of them rushed to define. One autumn evening, Danielle found him standing alone on the terrace. "You're staring again," she said. Vincent glanced at her. "I've learned to notice people." She smiled. "That sounds suspiciously healthy." He laughed. A real laugh this time. Then he reached for her hand. He didn't take it immediately. He waited. Danielle remembered another night. Blood on white gauze. Rain against glass. A frightened maid standing before a man everyone called dangerous. Back then, Vincent had believed vulnerability was something enemies exploited. Danielle had believed invisibility was something people like her needed to survive. They had both been wrong. She placed her hand in his. "Dinner?" Vincent asked. "As your employee?" "No, as your nurse." "Absolutely not." Danielle smiled. "Then what exactly are you asking?" For once, the feared Vincent Calloway looked almost nervous. As a man asking a woman he respects to have dinner with him. Danielle let the silence stretch just long enough. "One dinner." His smile appeared. "One dinner." They walked inside together. Months earlier, Danielle had accidentally opened the wrong door and discovered a wound Vincent desperately wanted hidden. But the scar was never what changed their lives. She had seen humanity where others saw power. He had learned to see worth where his world had taught him to see rank. And somewhere between a bloodstained bandage and a hand offered without demand, two people from different worlds discovered that dignity could build what fear never could. She had accidentally seen his wound. He had finally seen her worth.